Paulo Coelho's book, The Alchemist, tells the story of a young man from a very simple, plain farm family in a small community. His parents sent him to the seminary to get some education, but Santiago believed he would learn more from the world than he would in a seminary, so he left his home. When the story opens, we find Santiago with a flock of sheep on the plains of Andalusia, somewhere in Spain. He had been moving from country to country. Every now and then he would go to the local marketplaces to sell off wool from the sheep to take care of his basic needs. This probably went on for years, but at the point where we meet Santiago in this story, he was currently residing in a church. The roof had caved in and there was a giant sycamore tree growing where the sacristy was. During this time, he kept having this recurring dream where a child took him to the pyramids of Egypt and told him that if he comes here, he would find treasure. These dreams had reoccurred so much that it had become a bother. So he went out to find an interpretation. He met a gypsy woman who told him his dreams could actually be true, and as a matter of fact, she wasn't going to charge him for interpreting his dream, but rather he should bring a percentage of what he found. After he left there, he bumped into an old man who was Melchizedek, the king of Salem. This man further encouraged him to go after his dream. He sold off his flock of sheep and had so much money to fund his travels. But it was at this point everything started going bad for Santiago. A few days later, he had arrived Africa, where he entrusted his money to another young man he had met. This man was to be his guide to the pyramids of Egypt, as well as a translator because he didn't understand the language. This man ran off with his money, leaving him penniless. So here was Santiago in Africa. He didn't understand the language and he had no money. He contemplated giving up, getting some sheep and going back to his former life. But he didn't want to end up like every other person who once had a dream but never went after them. So he forged on. He got a job working in a glassware store somewhere on the hill. He worked here for many years, but at some point he even forgot about his dream. At the end of his years of service for this glassware merchant, he took his earnings and bought a camel and joined some travelers who were crossing the desert. They traveled for days and finally got to an oasis. There had been reports of some warring desert tribes, so the chiefs of this oasis advised them to stay and wait until the war was over before they continued their journey. However, there was a certain alchemist that stayed in the oasis. Against the advice of the elders, Santiago and the alchemist set off into the desert. The alchemist knew of the boy's dreams. He himself had accomplished his own dream of turning lead into gold and wanted to help Santiago realize his. Long story short, they journeyed on into the desert, but at some point they were met by two riders who were part of the warring tribes. They robbed Santiago and the alchemist of all their gold and laughed at Santiago for coming into the desert, all because of a dream. The riders obviously thought dreams were for fools, and one of them even recounted his own dream where he had found a pile of gold under a sycamore tree in a church that had a roof caved in. Santiago knew this place. This had been his home for months. Here he was in the heart of Egypt, having come all this way, only to find that his treasure has always been with him. He found his way back to Spain and dug up this pile of gold. As promised, he gave a percentage to the gypsy woman. The morals of this story is simple. We all have dreams. We all have this thing inside of us, but very few are going to take the bold step of journeying into the wild to achieve this. The journey itself doesn't give us the gift, but it gives us unique perspectives to see the gifts for what they are and what they could be. So here was Santiago. He had discovered his gifts. He had discovered his treasure. He had lived his life. He had traveled the world. He had lived a life with no regrets. He probably had also understood that our dreams are connected. I might need yours to achieve mine, and you might need mine to achieve yours. Share this story to a friend or a family member, and by all means, read the book. And hopefully one day we'll all find our treasure.